Welcome back to the A-List with Alexandra, where we break down all things Hollywood. With me today is Canadian actress and author Heidi von Palleske. You've acted in a variety of genres, from the comedy Life with Derek, which was
Yeah.
a favorite of mine,
Okay.
to thriller movies such as A House Next Door.
Yeah.
What was one role you had truly loved and that left some sort of impact on you or was special in a different way for you?
Well, there were a few, but a recent role that I absolutely adored, and it's in a film that's coming out. Is It's called Bordello. It's a feminist western, so so it was pretty kick-ass, right? And the funny thing was that pretty much another role was written for me. It was a smaller role, the villain, because I've done a lot of villains, and she was a German woman who was going into buy a young girl in order to sell her virginity in another brothel in the old west, and the German accent and so on. But it was like 2 days work, and I was told I had to audition for it, even though it was written for me. And I thought, well, if I'm going to have to audition, I'm going to audition for one of the leads instead. So I went and I auditioned for the Irish woman um, who was just, I mean, she was tough and full of heart, and she could shoot, and she just didn't take any garbage from anyone, and she had this great Irish accent, and had a fantastic backstory, and there's horses, and there's a really strong female cast. It was kind of like, it ended up being a bit like a Western Thelma and Louise, and I love that character. I mean, I just, every once in a while when I'm upset about something, I hear the Irish coming out. So 'cause I'm German on my dad's side and Irish on my mom's side, so I could have gone with either of the roles. But that Irish woman was like, I loved her. Ada, she was fantastic. So that was great. The experience, of course, where I started my career, which was with Dead Ringers all those years ago, and sort of coming out the gate, my first big film, it was the second female lead. It wasn't a lead, but still, that was amazing, because that was my breakout into film. And I got to work with David Cronenberg and Jeremy Irons. Doesn't get much better than that, really. You know what I mean? I mean, like, I was working with one of the best directors in the world, and Jeremy's not bad as an actor.
He's a
So,
fan.
um, so that was pretty intense, and that was pretty great, and that was a big learning moment for me about working in film, and it gave me a career. I mean, I really have to thank Cronenberg for my career. I really do. So.
And you've acted both in Canada and Los Angeles. What would you say is the major differences between the film scenes in Canada and LA, if any?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, because a lot of the things that shoot in Canada are American projects,
Mhm.
right? Um, but this will probably come back to bite me. But I can tell you this: that there's a big difference between auditioning for an American director to a Canadian director.
Mm.
And it's interesting, because people think that Canadians have more irony, and that Americans are a bit more, you know, I don't know what the word is. You should know the word, but a little bit, a little more just honest about, but I have found that when I walk into a room and it's an American director, if I'm kind of all full of pith and vinegar, I'll get the job. And with a Canadian director, you have to be a bit more thoughtful and respectful, kind of. I have noticed that. So yeah, so there's that difference. And I think the biggest difference is the budgets. It's, if someone can get a Canadian project off the ground, it's usually on $1.75, and there's more money in American production, for sure. But I've had some great experiences with both. Honestly, I really have.
I spoke to Christopher Britton, who I'm sure you know, and our friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did mention too, he said he would love to see a bigger film scene in Vancouver and see
Mhm.
that pick up. So it does sound like that's
Well, Vancouver more so than Toronto. I'm in Toronto now. I spent a little bit of time in Vancouver, but Vancouver does more American products than I think any other city in Canada,
Mhm.
and that's possibly because Hollywood's just sort of down the street, right? I mean, they're on the same time zone, and so Of the of the sort of Canadian auteurs, uh, they're all they're all pretty much in Toronto. Yeah.
Mm.
The place to shoot right now is Nova Scotia, and that's probably because they're saying that Nova Scotia is the safest place in North America for the pandemic. So,
Oh, okay. Look at Canada. Canada is just a hot spot and everyone
well,
wants.
you know what Vancouver did? They're so smart. They locked down as though they were New Zealand or something. So even if you're going from New Brunswick into Nova Scotia, you did a 2 week quarantine. Everyone did a 2 week quarantine, not an isolation, a quarantine, and they did that at the very beginning. So they were able to, they took it very seriously and they nipped it in the bud, kind of. And it's a smaller place, right? I mean, Toronto's huge, right? It's our biggest city, so of course it's going to be much more of a hot spot. But we've had some production that's continued throughout, the pandemic. So yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of auditioning, what are some stories? Do you have any crazy audition stories? Anything that's really stuck in your head or made an impact on you that you could share with the viewers?
I did an audition one time where I don't know why I couldn't get my head around the other character's name, and so every time I did it in front of the director, I changed name from Jennifer to Julie to and I'd look at my script and be like, and he'd say, oh yeah, let's just try it again, and we tried again, and it became a thing where I just couldn't remember her name. So there's pages that I had remembered verbatim, couldn't remember the other character's name. And that director hired me, and I asked him why. And he said, "I just want to see if you could get the name right on the day." So,
Oh, that is
that's
so fun.
fine.
That is so funny. And do you have any rituals that you do before the camera's up and roll, something or anything that you need to do every time before to prepare, get into character, anything like that?
I'll tell you something. All those years of acting, and there's been a lot of years. I would say that I'm never comfortable on set. I'm always nervous until we get that first master in the can, and the director says, "Great, we got one." And as soon as that happens, I'm fine. But that very, very, very first shot of that shoot, I think, why do I do this? Oh my God, I hate this. Oh, this is awful. Why is my heart pounding? I'm squeezing my toes in my high heel shoes. Why am I doing that? So it doesn't, that the first day for me has never gotten easier. But then the moment the director goes, great, you know, moving in for close-ups or whatever, then I'm fine. But that first shot is always, I don't know, it's strange. And I've
Well,
talked to a few other actors, and a couple have said that it's the same for them too. So yeah, yeah.
well, I think people say too, the moment you get things are so easy, you're complacent, it's time to move on to something else. So that's actually great that, when you get on set, you're still having your first time butterflies, you love it, you want to do well.
Well, it's like being in love, right? It's like a first date each time, right? And the thing is that you've got a different crew every time, you've got a different director, you've got different, so it's like a first date, and then the conversation gets going, everything's fine, and you relax into it, right? So I guess, yeah, it's a bit like being in love on a first date. Absolutely, yeah.
So, Heidi, you have a new book out that was just released in Canada and the United States, Two
Yes.
White Queens and the One-Eyed Jack. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it came out in Canada first, and it's being published by Dundurn Press, and it's been endorsed by. I've got some pretty great endorsements, including John Irving and Jeremy Irons, who both loved the book and gave me a blurb for the back of it. And it's a really interconnected story. It's a story where there are different plot lines. So if you're someone who likes just one voice, it may be not for you. It's a bit more complicated than that, and I really wanted to explore how we're all interconnected and how events that happen in the world also affect us on a personal level, and then something that I might do could reverberate with other people I haven't even met.
Right.
So it really looks at that.
Where did the inspiration for this book come from?
Well, I think that inspiration is it's actually kind of a living, breathing thing, right? And I think that inspiration keeps renewing itself. So I don't know that there's, just one bolt of lightning that, is the thing. But I guess there were a few things that contributed. I think, but before I started, there's a lot of talk of walls going up, and we were all, even before the talk of reinforcing borders. we were starting to become a little less connected than we had been, prior to 911. And so I wanted to set something in a time when we thought of a global community, when we thought that we were all connected a bit more. And so I wanted a book that was about tearing walls down between us instead of putting walls up. And then, more specifically, I have a character who lost an eye, and I have two characters who have only 30% sight, but they see more of the world than people who don't travel. And so I really wanted to have a meditation on what it means to see, and if there's a difference between vision and a difference between seeing things or taking things in, and what does it mean to see. So those were the themes that inspired me.
I
Mhm.
love that. And like you said, I think now more than ever, the world needs both of those things, to be more connected, to break down walls and be united, and also to see things for what they are and have vision versus just sight going through your everyday motions. I think that message really resonates now, more than
I
ever.
think so too. I mean, we had the whole idea of the talk about boundaries and borders and walls and fences between us. But then we had a pandemic which isolated us even more, and so we have these ways of reaching out, like Zoom or the telephone or Facebook or whatever. But it's not the same as meeting face to face. So we're all feeling a little bit isolated. So I think that the book does reflect that somewhat. That understanding that there is the path of the individual, but then there's also the path of the collective. And so, what I choose to do for myself, is also what I choose to do for everyone. So there's a sense of society and there's a sense of individual purpose. And how do those two things run parallel? So, yeah.
It's great.
Mhm.
And does being an actress impact the writing process in any way? Because you are coming from the point of not only a writer, but someone who has taken words off of a page and brought them to life.
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting because my first book wasn't heavy on dialogue. So the assumption would be that actors like to write dialogue. And I think that when I do write dialogue, that I have a pretty good ear in that, I've had to do various accents over the years. I've
Mhm.
had, characters from different walks of life, so they talk differently. And so I think that my characters all tend to have a very distinct voice, and so we don't get them mixed up in dialogue. So I think that does affect things. But I also think that, 'cause I'm a film actor, and as a film actor, you very often shoot out of order. So when you go on set, you have to know your character so well that you would know how they would react to anything at any given time, because you're not doing it in the order of the story. And I think, in a sense, when you write, you have to know what your characters will do at any given time, and and understand backstory. I mean, when you work on a film, you also work a lot on your own, creating a backstory for a character, and it's something that you'll never see on the screen, except though there'll be I don't know, just like an extra depth to that performance. And I think the same thing happens when I write. I really look at a backstory to a character, and you may not see it on the page, but it will color and spice up the way the character behaves and reacts.
Yeah. And also, as an actress, you're given a script, you are a film and television actress, and you have a certain amount of time to memorize those lines, put them out there and perform them. How did the writing process work for you? Was it kind of similar to that of I want to get this out, I know my structure, or was it more of leisure and it took some time to build and
This book wasn't leisurely at all. This book, I was on a very disciplined schedule,
Mhm.
and I wrote every single day without fail, and so I took it very seriously. Um, and so there was no, waiting for the muse to descend kind of stuff. Um, but the thing is that, okay, so I think, I'm going to grandstand a bit here. I think that actors, particularly female actors, sometimes get a pretty bad rap. We've all heard flaky actor or that kind of thing. But there are very few professions where a person's expected to show up, like even if they're almost dead. Like the show must go on. It reverberates into film and TV too. So you show up no matter what. You show up in the worst circumstances. I shot on the day, that I was told my dad was dying, and I had a day and I had to shoot, and I had to deal with being a daughter and grabbing the phone in between and doing my lines in a comedy, you know.
Wow.
And so the idea of actors being flaky, we're never late,
Mhm.
and then, I don't know too many flakes who can memorize 12 pages in a night, you know?
Yep.
So, and you're not only memorizing the 12 pages, but you're also adding an emotional element to them, right? And making them believable. So when you recite them, you're not just reciting words, you're reciting words that somehow you have filtered through yourself as a memory. And then on the day, you're going to have a director telling you, no, you need, no, make sure you hit that light over there. And when you say this line, do this. So you've got different parts of your brain activated at all times. And you're kind of editing as you're performing. And so I think that helped as a writer, in that, I was very disciplined. I was able to hold the plot, but also the emotionality of the story at the same time. So, I would understand that, we had to get the story moving along, but we also had to take the time to be inside the characters' heads. So I think that the balance between the narrative and the emotional, I think that I understood in a different way because of being an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And an author and an actress, a woman of many talents, many hats. Where did the love of acting come from?
I don't know. My grandmother used to say I was born with words in my mouth. So, you know, um, when I was a child, I struggled with concentrating in class, and I was certainly bright enough, but I was bored and I was distracted.
Mhm.
And my sister and my brother got marks far easier than I did, and so they came home with their A's and whatever, and I struggled more, and I found that the thing I could do was I could write plays. So by third grade, I was writing a play every week for my classmates, casting them all in it. I was directing them, and of course, doing one of the roles, sometimes a larger one, sometimes a smaller one. And the teacher was impressed and just allowed me to do that. So, in a sense, I had my own little theater company in third grade. And so I was writing and directing and acting at that point. But I didn't think that's what I was going to be when I grew up. I thought I'd be a vet. It was just something that I could do, and it helped me get through school because I had my niche. I wasn't the sports girl. I wasn't, I had a little niche, and I had my team of merry men who would do little plays every week with me. So I think it started there, really. Yeah.
And you had dreams of being a vet. When did that change? When did you go into acting full-time career mode?
Well, there's a few things. In my teens, it certainly changed. I grew up on a farm, and when you grow up on a farm, you see a lot of things.
Mhm.
And so, I wasn't aware that there were vets that were just for little pussy cats and dogs. I was aware of the vet that came and dealt with a breech birth, and those sorts of things. And sometimes there's some pretty tough things that you see growing up on a farm. And so then I remember that when I was about 15 years old, I read a play called Antigone, and it fell into my lap. I don't know where I got it from, but I remember reading it and thinking, if someone can write words that are so amazing like this, then I've got to be an actor so I can bring these words to people. Like I've discovered them on the page. I've got to bring them to people. So I went into acting with the purest of intent. I went into acting not because I wanted to be seen and heard, but because of my love of language and the word. And, so that's where the change happened. That happened about at 15 years old.
And having that passion and that pureness, as you described it, for the words on the paper and acting, that also is probably what pushed you forward and made you successful, because you were doing it truly because you loved it in your heart and you wanted to bring these words to so many people.
Yes, but the reality the reality is that you also have to pay your bills.
Yeah.
So very often you'll do a job, and okay, seriously. I was on a set, and I probably had the worst words that an actor ever had to say come out of my mouth. It was these words: "You got me lathered to a tizzy with all your dipsy doodles." And at that point, I thought, Heidi, you really should be writing, because if that's what's coming out of your mouth instead of the dream of Antigone and Shakespeare, and you're saying, "You got me lathered to a tizzy with all your dipsy doodles," just to pay your rent, then you need to find the courage to put your own words out there instead of just being a mouthpiece for other people's words. And so that transition happened. And I think that maybe there was an insecurity, that prevented me from writing in a big way, because I've been a mouthpiece for other people's words. And it was with a lot of courage that I made the transition into writing.
What was the transition into writing like for you?
Well, I never didn't write.
Mhm.
I always did, whether I was writing poetry or articles. I wrote for radio, and I've written some scripts. So I always wrote. And but my first novel, called "They Don't Run Red Trains Anymore," it started because a friend of mine stepped in front of a subway train and committed suicide.
Oh my God.
And I had a really hard time, absorbing that. I had really, I would stand at the subway and just think, how could you? So I started to write down, those questions. I started to write down, how that must have been, where she, when I tried to be in her head to understand it. And so those paragraphs became a short story that won competitions, and then it became a novel. And so, really, what drove me to the pen in terms of writing books and fiction was a huge sacrifice. It was the suicide and the death of someone I was very, very fond of. And so, I don't know. I mean, I think some people are just born to write, and I think other people, it has to be ignited by an event. And I think that I was putting off writing. I think I was supposed to write, but this horrible thing became a catalyst for me to seize life and what I'm supposed to do, but also to write through the pain. And I think that disquiet, discontent, pain, I think all of those things often drive an artist, whether that's to, pick up a paintbrush and paint, or to pick up a pen and write.
Mhm. Now, Heidi, what is one thing you want your audience to take away from your work, both as an actress and an author?
Well, as an artist, I think it's really important that we have a journey of our emotions, not just our thoughts, or not just a story. I think that it's really important to touch people on an emotional level, and find humanity in that. And so even if I'm playing a villain, right, or if I'm writing a villain, it's not that I necessarily find the humanity in the person, but I try to find the humanity in the situation. And then hopefully, someone can relate to an element of it, and feel either you know connection, or smarter, or better, or understood in some way. So that's what I'd like through my work, to have an emotional connection with people. Mm.
That's
Does that
beautiful.
make does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Completely. That's
Yeah.
when you want to connect with an audience. You want them to leave feeling something and finding something in their own life that they can relate to through your work, through your writing. And that's completely that's
The thing is too, I think that, I think we all act,
mhm.
every day. I mean, I think that, for instance, you may talk to your grandmother or your mother differently than you talk to a boyfriend or a child, right? So we do find different aspects of ourselves, and we put on those different faces. But those faces may very well be, part of us that's inside of us. And so I think that we all act at times, but I think that through art we can drop the masks that we have for some people, and just have this raw experience of feeling. And I think that's really important, because it connects us with ourselves.
Right.
Mm.
And I think during these times, being so isolated in the pandemic, it is really important for people to connect. And whether that be through writing in a book or film, I think those aspects have been really important to people during these times, especially.
Yeah,
You
and I think people are actually taking the time to read, or to
know,
watch films, or to look at art. I think that our lives had become so busy
Mhm.
that we weren't letting things touch us in the same way. I mean, right now, I did this last April, and I'm doing it again this April because April is Poetry Month. And so I write a poem every day and put it on Facebook or whatever. And, I think that before the pandemic, people would just scroll through and people are reading them. And people are turning to poetry because poetry is a conversation of soul to soul. And I think that we have slowed down and we are taking artistic things, you know, into ourselves in a different way than we had before because we were all so busy. And
Mhm.
now we're not as busy. And so, I think that feeding the soul has become important again.
Right. Completely. Taking the time to step back and feed the soul, do things that are important to you, and find love and inspiration through writing, movies, things that people were hustling and bustling and flew past that before they had time.
They were scrolling on their phones, and now people are reading poetry again. They're interested in other things. I know people are picking up musical instruments, things that they had maybe started to learn when they were younger, and now they're just expressing themselves as well. So it's not only listening and taking in what other people say, it's also expressing yourselves. And I think that that's become very important. And hopefully when we get through this, and we will get through this, but hopefully we've learned something in this time, right? And that we continue to reach out and touch other people.
Hopefully it sticks. People continue.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
do you have any upcoming projects in the works that we can look forward to? I know you did mention one kick-ass Western movie.
Recast Western that's coming out sometime this year, and it'll be on. I'm sure it's going to go straight into, into a streaming thing because what theaters are open right now.
Right?
It would have been nice if it would have done, the festival route, and I could fly and go to film festivals, but I don't think that's going to happen on this one. So it's Bordello, and that's coming up. And right now, I'm actually just really focusing on the next book. I'm writing sequel to Two White Queens and One Eyed Jack. I want to put it out as a trilogy. So I just got to the 2/3 mark of the first draft.
Okay.
So hopefully I have the first draft done by the beginning of June, and then I can go into a rewrite situation. So that's that's my joy right now. Yeah.
Two White Queens and the One-Eyed Jack is out now. That's very exciting. And you're also working on the trilogy. So viewers have a lot to look
And
forward.
working on an adaptation for the screen too. So yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would be perfect. A producer, a writer, and maybe you can get a role. You can put yourself in a little
Get myself a
cameo.
hat rack for all my hats.
I love that. Yes, we need a bigger hat rack. That is for sure.
Right.
Heidi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It was wonderful talking to you. I really
Pleasure.
enjoyed it.